The brass casings clinked softly as Corporal Linnea Voss swept them into neat piles across the concrete floor of Range 7. Dawn light filtered through the open bay doors, casting long shadows across the firing line where yesterday's SEAL team had burned through thousands of rounds. The metallic smell of spent gunpowder still lingered in the cool morning air, mixing with the desert sage that grew wild beyond the perimeter fence. Voss moved with methodical precision, her movements efficient and unhurried. Each casing was sorted by caliber, collected into separate containers with the kind of attention to detail that most people reserved for far more important tasks. But for her, there was something meditative about the work, something that kept her hands busy and her mind quiet. The rumble of diesel engines broke the morning silence. She glanced up to see a convoy of black SUVs rolling through the main gate, kicking up dust as they approached the operations building. More SEALs. The third team this month to use the remote training facility tucked into the Nevada mountains, far from curious eyes and civilian populations. Voss returned to her work, knowing what would come next. They always arrived the same way. Confident, loud, certain of their place at the top of the military food chain. And they always looked at people like her, the support staff who kept the ranges clean and the equipment maintained, as if they were part of the furniture. She heard them before she saw them. Boots on gravel, voices carrying across the open space between the operations building and the range complex. A group of 8 operators, full kit minus weapons, heading toward Range 7 for their initial walkthrough. Senior Chief Garrett Thorne led the group, his weathered face and gray-streaked beard marking him as one of the experienced operators who had seen more combat zones than most people could name. His voice carried authority and something else. A casual dismissiveness that came from years of being told he was the best. "They look like they cleaned this place with their eyes closed," Thorne said, his tone making it clear he did not mean it as a compliment. The other operators chuckled, their boots echoing on the concrete as they entered the bay. Voss continued sorting brass, her back to them, giving them space to inspect the facility. She had learned long ago that the best way to handle operators like these was to be invisible until they needed something. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've seen military training facilities in your area, or know someone who served in unglamorous but critical roles. Captain Morris Blackwell appeared in the doorway, his presence immediately commanding attention despite his quieter demeanor. He had run this facility for 6 years, turning it into one of the premier special operations training sites in the western United States. His eyes found Voss first, a brief nod of acknowledgement passing between them before he turned to address the SEAL team. "Gentlemen, welcome to Range 7, Blackwell said. You will have exclusive access to all 12 ranges during your 2-week training cycle. Corporal Voss and her team maintain the facilities. They are armed personnel with appropriate clearances. Any questions about range operations go through me." Thorne glanced at Voss, his expression suggesting he had plenty of questions, none of them about range operations. "She is one of yours, Captain. She keeps this facility running," Blackwell replied, his tone carrying a subtle edge that only someone who knew him well would catch. "I suggest you let her do her job while you do yours." The tension lasted only a moment before Thorne smiled and nodded, but Voss recognized the look in his eyes. She had seen it 100 times before. The automatic dismissal. The assumption that anyone in a support role must be there because they could not hack it anywhere else. The SEALs moved through the range, examining the firing lanes, the weapon racks, the observation tower that overlooked all 12 positions. One of the younger operators, Petty Officer Kenji Matsuda, paused near where Voss was working. He watched her sort the brass for a moment before speaking. "That is a lot of different calibers," he said. His voice held genuine curiosity rather than condescension. Voss glanced up, meeting his eyes briefly. "50 cal. Your team went through about 4,000 rounds yesterday. All accounted for." Matsuda nodded, looking impressed. "That is detailed work." "It is necessary work," Voss replied, returning to her task. She could feel Thorne watching them from across the bay, his expression suggesting he did not approve of his junior operator fraternizing with the help. The SEALs completed their walk through and departed, leaving Voss alone with the clinking brass and the quiet morning. She finished sorting, loaded the containers onto a hand truck, and wheeled them toward the ammunition building. The sun had climbed higher now, burning off the cool desert air and replacing it with the dry heat that would dominate the afternoon. As she passed the observation tower, she allowed herself a brief glance at the range. 12 firing lanes stretching out across the desert floor. Targets set at various distances from 100 meters out to 1,500. She knew every inch of this range, every wind pattern, every trick of light and shadow that could fool a shooter. Knew them the way a musician knows the keys of their instrument. But that knowledge was something she kept to herself now, just like the memories of why she had requested this assignment in the first place. Just like the reason she spent her nights alone in her quarters, avoiding the social gatherings where operators told war stories and compared deployment patches. Staff Sergeant Ruth Carver met her at the ammunition building, her friendly smile a contrast to the morning's earlier interactions. Ruth had been at the facility almost as long as Blackwell, and she had a gift for reading people that made her popular with every unit that rotated through. "I see him at the new guests," Ruth said, helping unload the brass containers. "Let me guess. They were charming and respectful and treated you like a valued member of the team." Voss smiled despite herself. "Something like that. Thorne is old school," Ruth continued. "The kind who think support staff are just obstacles between him and the mission. Give him a few days. They always come around once they realize we actually know what we're doing." "Maybe," Voss said, though she had learned not to expect much. It did not really matter what they thought of her. She was not here to earn their respect or prove anything to anyone. She was here because this job allowed her to serve without being in the spotlight, without having to carry the weight of expectations that had nearly crushed her before. The two women worked in comfortable silence, logging the brass, preparing ammunition requisitions for the next training cycle. Through the window, Voss could see the SEALs gathering at Range 3, beginning their equipment checks and pre-training briefings. They moved with practiced efficiency, a well-oiled team that had worked together through multiple deployments. She recognized that cohesion, had once been part of a team that moved the same way. But that was before the mission that had gone wrong, before the decisions that still haunted her sleep, before she had realized that being the best at something did not mean you were immune to its cost. Blackwell appeared in the doorway, his expression thoughtful. "Voss, I need you on range safety for their live fire this afternoon. Jenkins called in sick." Voss nodded. "No problem, sir." And Voss, Blackwell added, his voice lower. "If Thorne gives you any trouble, you let me know. I do not care how many deployments he has. This is my facility." "Understood, sir." After he left, Ruth looked at Voss with raised eyebrows. Blackwell does not usually get that protective. "What is the story with you two?" "No story," Voss replied. "He is just a good commander who looks after his people." But that was not entirely true, and they both knew it. Blackwell was one of the few people at the facility who knew exactly who Linnea Voss had been before she requested reassignment to range support. He knew about the medals she never wore, the commendations she never mentioned, the skills she had deliberately buried beneath the mundane routine of brass collection and range maintenance. And he had never once asked her why she had walked away from it all. For that, she would always be grateful. The afternoon sun beat down on Range 3 as Voss took her position in the observation tower. From this elevated vantage point, she could see all 12 firing lanes clearly, along with the desert terrain beyond where the targets stood at various distances. Her role as range safety officer was straightforward: monitor the shooters, ensure all protocols were followed, and stop the exercise immediately if anything went wrong. Below her, the SEAL team assembled their weapons with practiced efficiency. Long rifles, sidearms, specialized equipment that represented millions of dollars in taxpayer investment. Thorne moved among his men, checking equipment, offering quiet corrections that spoke to years of experience turning good operators into exceptional ones. Voss keyed her radio. "Range 3 is hot. All personnel clear the impact area. The SEALs began their drills. Individual marksmanship first, each operator firing control pairs at targets from 100 to 300 meters. The sound of gunfire echoed across the desert. Sharp cracks followed by the distant ping of bullets striking steel. Voss watched through her binoculars, her trained eye automatically noting each shooter's stance, breathing, trigger control. Matsuda was solid. Clean form, consistent groupings. The operator to his left, a stocky man whose name tape read Sullivan, rushed his shots slightly, trading accuracy for speed. Thorne himself shot with mechanical precision, each round placed exactly where he intended despite the casual way he held his rifle. But it was the conversation she overheard through her radio that caught her attention. The SEALs had left their team channel open, probably forgetting that range safety monitored all frequencies during live fire. "Did you see the precision shooting competition bracket?" Sullivan said between strings of fire. "Finals are in 2 weeks at Coronado. Winner gets bragging rights for the whole year." "Thorne is going to take it again," another voice replied. 3 years running. Nobody shoots like the senior chief. Thorne's voice cut through the chatter. "Less talking, more shooting. Save the gossip for after we qualify." The afternoon wore on. The SEALs ran through increasingly complex drills. Moving targets, timed courses, stress shoots where they had to solve mathematical problems between strings of fire. Voss called range commands, monitored safety protocols, and tried not to think about the last time she had run drills like these. But memories had a way of surfacing despite her best efforts. She remembered her own team, remembered the camaraderie that came from trusting your life to the people beside you, remembered the satisfaction of a perfect shot, the rifle becoming an extension of her own will, the target falling exactly when and where she intended. She remembered the mission in the Hindu Kush, the impossible shot that had saved her team, and the second shot, the one that still woke her up at night, that had killed a child who had been used as a human shield. A child she had not seen until it was too late. A child whose face she would carry forever. "Range 3 is cold," Voss announced, pushing the memories back down where they belonged. "All clear." The SEALs secured their weapons and gathered for their after-action review. Voss descended from the tower, her job complete for the moment. As she reached the ground, Matsuda intercepted her path. "Corporal Voss," he said, "can I ask you something?" She paused, wary but curious. "What do you need, petty officer? You were watching us pretty closely up there. I saw you making notes. Any observations on my form?" The question surprised her. Most operators, especially SEALs, did not ask support staff for shooting advice. She glanced toward where Thorne stood, debriefing the rest of the team, knowing he would not appreciate one of his men seeking input from a range cleaner. "Your fundamentals are solid," she said carefully. "You might try controlling your breathing better on the longer shots. You're holding slightly too long before breaking the trigger." Matsuda considered this, then nodded. "That makes sense. I have been feeling rushed on the 300-meter targets." "Thanks." He rejoined his team before she could respond. Thorne looked up, his eyes finding Voss across the range. His expression made it clear he had noticed the interaction and did not approve. She turned away, heading back toward the equipment building. Evening settled over the facility like a blanket. Most of the personnel had retreated to the dining facility or their quarters, but Voss found herself drawn back to Range 7, the place where she had started her morning, the place where she felt most at peace. The range was empty now, the firing line silent. She stood at Lane 5, looking downrange at the targets that stood like silent sentinels against the darkening sky. The wind had picked up, coming from the northwest at about 8 miles per hour. Temperature dropping as the desert gave up its heat. Humidity near zero. She knew these conditions intimately, knew how they would affect a bullet in flight, knew the corrections needed to compensate for wind drift at various distances, knew it all without thinking, the calculations as natural as breathing. Her hand moved unconsciously to her hip, where a sidearm would have hung during her previous assignment. But she wore no weapon now, just the radio and the range safety vest that marked her as support staff. Captain Blackwell found her there, his boots crunching on gravel as he approached. I thought I might find you here. Voss turned, offering a slight smile. Just doing a final check before securing for the night, sir. Blackwell stood beside her, looking downrange. How is the SEAL team? Professional. Competent. They know their business. But she hesitated, then decided honesty was easier than evasion. But they shoot like operators who have never been truly tested. Good fundamentals, solid training. But no adaptability. No creativity. They follow the manual perfectly because they have never been in a situation where the manual was not enough. Blackwell absorbed this quietly. That is a very specific observation from someone who was just supposed to monitor safety protocols. Old habits, Voss said softly. Hard to turn off the analytical part. You miss it, Blackwell said. It was not a question. She considered lying, then decided he deserved better. Parts of it. The precision. The challenge. The satisfaction of being the best at something that mattered. But not the cost. Never the cost. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. Finally, Blackwell spoke again. Thorn asked me about you. Wanted to know your background, why you were here instead of in an operational unit. What did you tell him? That your personnel file is classified above his clearance level and that he should focus on his own training. Voss almost laughed. I bet he loved that. He did not. But he will leave you alone now. Blackwell paused, then added, you know you do not have to hide here forever. When you are ready, there are units that would take you back in a heartbeat. I know, sir. But I am not ready. Maybe I never will be. Blackwell nodded, accepting her answer without judgment. Well, when and if that changes, my door is open. Until then, you are the best range maintenance officer I have ever had. Even if you're wildly overqualified for the job. After he left, Voss remained at the firing line a while longer. The stars were coming out now, brilliant against the black desert sky. She thought about Matsuda asking for advice. Thought about Thorn's dismissive attitude. Thought about the precision shooting competition they had mentioned. 3 years running, they had said, nobody shoots like the senior chief. She wondered if that was true. Wondered what Thorn would think if he knew that the woman who cleaned his brass had once been the top-ranked sniper in her entire operational command. That she had made shots he could not imagine. That she had walked away from all not because she could not do it anymore, but because she had discovered she was too good at it. The weight of that knowledge settled on her shoulders as she secured range 7 for the night. Tomorrow, the SEALs would return. They would shoot, and she would watch. They would dismiss her, and she would accept it. Because being invisible was easier than being seen. Being underestimated was easier than carrying expectations she could no longer bear. But somewhere deep inside, beneath all the layers of careful numbness she had built, something stirred. A small voice that remembered what it felt like to be excellent, to be respected, to matter. She silenced that voice as she walked back to her quarters through the desert night. Silenced it the way she had learned to silence everything that reminded her of who she used to be. Because Corporal Linnea Voss, range maintenance officer, was who she needed to be now. Even if Senior Chief Garrett Thorn and his team would never know what they were really looking at when they looked at her. The next morning brought a training evolution that would push the SEALs beyond basic marksmanship. Voss arrived at the operations building to find Commander Dale, Ashford reviewing the day's schedule with Captain Blackwell. Ashford was the overall team leader, older than Thorn by a few years, with the kind of quiet authority that came from leading men through situations where mistakes meant body bags. We will be running urban assault scenarios on ranges 9 through 12, Ashford explained, his finger tracing the facility map. Live fire, multiple Jaudoues, stress conditions. I need your best people on safety. Blackwell nodded. I will assign Corporal Voss as primary safety officer. She has experience with complex evolutions. Thorn, standing nearby, made a sound that might have been skepticism. With all due respect, Captain, we are running hot drills with multiple shooters in close quarters. Maybe someone with more recent operational experience would be better suited. The room went quiet. Voss, standing in the doorway with her equipment checklist, felt the weight of 3 sets of eyes turned toward her. She kept her expression neutral, years of practice making it easy to hide what she felt. Corporal Voss has the necessary qualifications, Blackwell said, his tone brooking no argument. She will be your primary safety officer, unless you would prefer to postpone your training while I find someone else. Ashford glanced between Blackwell and Voss, his tactical mind clearly processing dynamics that went deeper than the surface conversation. That will not be necessary, Captain. I'm sure the corporal is more than capable. But his eyes lingered on Voss for a moment longer, and she recognized the look. He was a man who had learned to read people quickly and accurately, and whatever he saw in her stance, her bearing, or her eyes made him curious. The urban assault ranges were designed to simulate close-quarters combat in city environments. Multi-story structures, narrow corridors, pop-up targets that required instant friend or foe identification. The kind of environment where a single mistake could kill your teammate as easily as the enemy. Voss positioned herself in the control tower that overlooked all four ranges. From here, she could monitor every angle, track every shooter, and hit the emergency stop if anything went wrong. The responsibility was significant. Lives depended on her attention to detail. The SEALs moved through the structures like water, finding its path. Years of training evident in every movement, every clearing pattern, every moment of controlled aggression. But Voss saw the flaws. Saw Sullivan hesitate for a fraction of a second too long before committing to a room entry. Saw another operator, Petty Officer Chun, rush his target identification and nearly engage a no-suit silhouette. She made notes, but said nothing. Her job was safety, not training critique. Even if her observations could improve their performance. Even if she could see exactly what they were doing wrong and how to fix it. During a scheduled break, Ruth Carver appeared with water and energy bars for the operations team. She found Voss in the tower, surrounded by monitors and radio equipment. Her focus absolute. You look intense, Ruth said, offering water. Everything okay? Just doing my job? Voss replied, accepting the bottle gratefully. Complex evolution. Lots of moving parts. Ruth glanced at the monitors, showing the SEALs preparing for their next run. They seem pretty good at what they do. They are. But good is not the same as great. There is always room for improvement. You sound like you know the difference. Voss took a long drink, buying herself a moment. I have seen great. That is all. Before Ruth could probe further, the radio crackled. Range 9 preparing for hot run. All personnel acknowledge clear. Voss keyed her mic. Range safety confirms clear. Your go for hot run. The afternoon progressed through increasingly difficult scenarios. The SEALs adapted well, their teamwork solid even under stress. But it was during the final evolution that things nearly went wrong. Two teams were running simultaneous clearing patterns through adjacent structures. The scenario required coordination between units operating in close proximity but without direct line of sight. Complicated. Dangerous. Exactly the kind of training that separated good units from exceptional ones. Voss tracked both teams on her monitors, her attention split but comprehensive. Team 1 moved through the eastern structure, while Team 2 cleared the western approach. The design called for them to converge on a central courtyard where hostile targets waited. But Sullivan, leading Team 2's point element, miscalculated his position. He was moving too fast, his aggression overriding his spatial awareness. In 30 seconds, he would enter the courtyard from an angle that would put him directly in Team 1's line of fire. Voss saw it developing, saw the converging paths, calculated the timing, recognized the danger. Her finger moved to the emergency stop button, but she hesitated. Stopping the evolution would embarrass Sullivan in front of his team. Would confirm every doubt Thorne had about her ability to handle complex operations. But lives mattered more than ego. All teams cease fire, she commanded, her voice cutting through the radio traffic with absolute authority. Sullivan, hold position. Team 1, adjust your advance angle 5 degrees north. You were about to engage friendly forces. The silence that followed lasted 3 heartbeats. Then Ashford's voice came through, calm but serious. All teams acknowledge. Sullivan, confirm your position. The young operator's voice carried the weight of realization. Position confirmed. I was off my mark. Good catch. Range safety. The evolution resumed with adjusted positioning. No one was hurt. No one would write reports about a friendly fire incident during training. But everyone on those teams now knew that the range maintenance corporal in the tower had probably saved Sullivan's life. When the training concluded, Ashford climbed the tower stairs to the observation deck. Voss was logging the day's events, her notes detailed and professional. The commander stood quietly for a moment, watching her work. That was exceptional situational awareness, he said finally. Most safety officers would not have caught that convergence until it was too late. Voss looked up from her log. Just doing my job, sir. That was more than just doing your job, Corporal. That was the kind of tactical vision that takes years to develop. Years in situations where mistakes have consequences. She met his eyes, seeing the question there. The same question Thorne had asked Blackwell. Who are you really? I've been doing this work for a while, Commander. You see enough evolutions, you learn to read the patterns. Ashford nodded slowly, but his expression said he was not buying the deflection. Well, regardless of where you learned it, my team owes you. Sullivan is young and aggressive. Good qualities in a SEAL, but they need tempering. You may have tempered him today without breaking him. After he left, Voss sat alone in the tower as the sun began its descent. Below, the SEALs were conducting their after-action review, and she could see Sullivan gesturing animatedly, probably explaining how he had lost his spatial orientation. Learning from his mistake. Getting better. That was what it was supposed to be about. Getting better. Pushing limits. Finding the edge of capability and then pushing past it. She had loved that once. Had lived for the challenge of being better today than she was yesterday. But she had also learned that there was a price for excellence. A cost paid in nightmares and guilt and the weight of decisions made in fractions of seconds. Decisions that saved some lives and ended others. Her radio crackled one more time. Corporal Voss, this is Captain Blackwell. Report to my office when you secure the range. The tone was neutral, but Voss knew what was coming. Ashford had undoubtedly mentioned the incident to Blackwell. Questions would follow. Questions about how a range maintenance officer had the kind of tactical awareness that most operators took years to develop. She looked out across the desert, watching the shadows lengthen across the ranges. Watching the place where she had found refuge begin to feel less like a hiding place and more like a cage. Because the problem with being good at something, with being truly exceptional, was that excellence had a way of revealing itself no matter how hard you try to bury it. And Linnea Voss was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, you could not hide from who you were forever. Not when every instinct, every observation, every moment of awareness betrayed the truth she had been trying so hard to conceal. That the woman cleaning the ranges and monitoring safety protocols was not who she appeared to be at all. Captain Blackwell's office was sparse and functional, decorated only with unit citations and operational maps of the surrounding terrain. Voss stood at attention while he finished reading a report on his desk, the silence stretching between them like a physical presence. Finally, he looked up. At ease, Corporal. This is not that kind of conversation. She relaxed slightly, but remained standing. You wanted to see me, sir? Commander Ashford was very impressed with your performance today. He used words like exceptional and tactical genius. Those are not terms that usually get applied to range safety officers. Voss said nothing, waiting to see where this was going. He also asked me point blank if you had operational experience. Command-level experience. The kind of experience that would explain how you read that friendly fire situation before it developed. I told him I saw the teams converging on my monitors, sir. Basic geometry. Blackwell leaned back in his chair, studying her. We have had this conversation before, Voss. About how long you can keep pretending to be something you are not. About how skill like yours has a way of surfacing no matter how deep you try to bury it. I'm not pretending to be anything, sir. I'm a range maintenance officer. That is my assignment. Your assignment, yes, but not your capability. There is a difference. He paused, then continued more gently. The SEALs are going to be here for another 10 days. They are running increasingly complex evolutions. And after today, Ashford specifically requested you as primary safety officer for all their operations. He trusts you. That is not something he gives lightly. Voss felt the walls closing in slightly. I can handle the assignment, sir. I know you can. That is not my concern. My concern is what happens when Thorn realizes that the woman he has been dismissing as a janitor with a rifle is actually better qualified than half his team. That kind of revelation has consequences. Then maybe Senior Chief Thorn needs to learn not to judge people by their current assignment, Voss said, allowing a trace of steel into her voice. Blackwell smiled slightly. There's the fire I remember. Good. You're going to need it. Because like it or not, you're being noticed. And once operators like Ashford and his team start paying attention, they tend to ask questions until they get answers. What do you want me to do, sir? Keep doing your job. Keep them safe. But also, maybe consider that running from your past has never actually worked for anyone. Eventually, you have to stop running and figure out how to live with what you have done and who you have been. After she was dismissed, Voss walked through the facility in the gathering dusk. She found herself at the equipment building, where her personal locker held the few possessions she kept on base. Inside, buried beneath civilian clothes and basic toiletries, was a small wooden box. She opened it carefully. Inside lay 3 things she had kept from her previous life. A challenge coin from her old unit, a photograph of her team, all of them smiling despite the harsh Afghan sun behind them, and a range card, yellowed with age, documenting a shot that had made her legend in certain circles. 2,100 meters. Wind shifting. Target moving. 1 round. 1 kill that had saved 12 lives. She touched the photograph, her finger tracing faces. 3 of the people in that image were dead now. 2 killed in action. 1 by suicide after returning home. The others were scattered across the military, some still operational, others retired or transferred to desk jobs. And then there was her, the one who had been so good at killing that it had broken something inside her. Ruth found her there, sitting on a bench outside the equipment building with the box on her lap. The older woman sat down beside her without asking permission, her presence comfortable and undemanding. Bad day? Ruth asked. Complicated day. Those are usually worse. Ruth glanced at the open box, saw the photograph. Old unit? Old life. They sat in silence for a while, watching the last light fade from the sky. Finally, Ruth spoke again. You know what I have learned in 22 years of military service. We all have old lives. Things we did, people we lost, versions of ourselves we left behind. The trick is not forgetting them. It is figuring out how to carry them without letting them crush us. Some weights are heavier than others, Voss said quietly. True, but you're still standing. That counts for something. After Ruth left, Voss remained on the bench. She thought about Ashford's questions, about Blackwell's warning, about the way Matsuda looked at her with growing respect, while Thorn's skepticism deepened into something harder to define. Curiosity mixed with resentment. Maybe the night grew cool, the desert giving up its heat to the stars. Voss finally closed the box, returned it to her locker, and headed toward the ranges. She knew she should go to her quarters, try to sleep, prepare for tomorrow. But sleep had never come easily, and tonight it would be impossible. Range 7 was dark and empty, the firing line a pale strip under the moon. She stood at her favorite position, lane 5, and looked downrange. The wind was calm now, maybe 3 miles per hour from the west. Temperature in the low 60s. Perfect conditions for long-range precision. In her mind, she calculated holds and adjustments. 600 meters, 800, 1,000. She remembered the feel of a rifle in her hands, the way the world narrowed to just the target and the shot. The absolute certainty that came from perfect preparation meeting perfect execution. She missed it more than she wanted to admit. Missed being excellent at something that mattered. Missed the respect that came not from rank or position, but from demonstrated capability. Missed being part of something larger than herself. But she did not miss the cost. Did not miss the faces that haunted her sleep. Did not miss the weight of knowing that her excellence had been purchased with other people's lives, even when those lives belonged to enemies, even when the kills were justified, even when she had no choice. A sound made her turn. Matsuda stood at the entrance to the range, his silhouette outlined against the lights from the operations building. He approached slowly, as if uncertain of his welcome. "Corporal Voss, I did not mean to interrupt. You're not interrupting anything. I was just checking the range before securing for the night." He nodded, but made no move to leave. "Can I ask you something? And I mean really ask, not the polite questions we make during duty hours." She considered sending him away, maintaining the distance she had carefully built. But something in his voice, a genuine respect that had nothing to do with rank or position, made her nod. "This afternoon, when you called that convergence before it happened, that was not luck or good monitoring. That was experience. Combat experience. The kind that keeps you alive when everything goes wrong." Voss said nothing, but her silence was answer enough. "Senior Chief Thorne thinks you're just a range cleaner who got lucky. Sullivan thinks you are some kind of guardian angel. Commander Ashford thinks you are something else entirely. He has been asking around, trying to figure out who you really are. And what do you think, Petty Officer Matsuda? I think," he said carefully, "that you are someone who had a life before this. Someone who did things that most people could not imagine. And I think whatever happened in that life made you want to stop being that person. But I also think you are still that person, whether you want to be or not." The honesty of it struck her harder than any accusation could have. She looked at this young operator who had somehow seen past her careful disguises to the truth underneath. "Why does it matter to you?" she asked. "Because I'm trying to be the best operator I can be. And I recognize excellence when I see it, even when it is hiding in plain sight. Even when the person it belongs to wishes nobody would notice." He left without waiting for a response, his boots crunching on gravel as he walked back toward the operations building. Voss stood alone again, but something had shifted. The walls she had built were developing cracks. The hiding place she had created was becoming transparent. And somewhere deep inside, beneath all the carefully maintained numbness and deliberate obscurity, a part of her that had been dormant for 2 years was beginning to wake up, beginning to remember what it felt like to be seen, to be recognized, to be respected for who she truly was rather than who she pretended to be. It terrified her, but it also felt like oxygen after drowning. The morning briefing for Day 7 of the SEAL training cycle carried a different energy. Commander Ashford stood at the front of the operations room, a detailed map of the facility spread across the table, his expression serious in a way that made even Thorne pay closer attention. "Gentlemen, today we begin our major field exercise. This will be a 72-hour continuous operation spanning all 12 ranges and the surrounding desert terrain. Multiple objectives, time-sensitive scenarios, and opposition force elements played by instructors from a base." Voss stood near the back of the room with the other support staff, her role as primary safety coordinator making her presence mandatory. She studied the map, her tactical mind automatically analyzing the terrain, identifying choke points, calculating sight lines, and fields of fire. The scenario simulates a high-value target recovery in hostile territory. Ashford continued, "We will have limited communications, simulated casualties requiring real medical response, and environmental challenges. This is as close to actual combat conditions as we can create in a training environment." Captain Blackwell stepped forward. "My team will be monitoring from multiple observation points. Corporal Voss will coordinate all safety operations from the mobile command post. Any safety concerns, any issues whatsoever, she has absolute authority to pause or terminate the exercise." Thorne's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he said nothing. Whatever doubts he harbored about Voss, he was professional enough to follow the chain of command. For now, the exercise kicked off at 0600 hours. The SEALs inserted via helicopter to a designated landing zone 3 kilometers from the facility perimeter, then began their approach through rough desert terrain. Voss monitored their progress from the command post, a modified trailer equipped with radio systems, computers, and direct feed from the observation post scattered across the operational area. Ruth worked beside her, coordinating logistics and medical standby teams. Captain Blackwell moved between observation posts, maintaining overall command authority. The exercise was running smoothly, the SEALs executing their approach with professional efficiency. But Voss felt something off. Nothing obvious, nothing she could point to and say this is wrong. Just an instinct born from years of operations where staying alive meant trusting your gut when your gut said danger. She studied the map again, comparing the SEAL team's route with the terrain features. They were approaching Range 8 from the northwest, using a dry wash for concealment. Standard tactics. But something about it bothered her. Ruth noticed her tension. What is it? Voss shook her head. Probably nothing. Just feels wrong somehow. Your feelings have kept people alive before. Trust them. Voss keyed her radio to the perimeter security channel. This is command post. Any units near Range 8, report status. The responses came back routine. All observation posts manned. All safety protocols active. No issues reported. But the feeling persisted. Voss pulled up the facility security logs, scanning through the overnight reports. Perimeter checks. Equipment status. Routine maintenance. Nothing unusual. Except, there, a notation from 0300 hours. Perimeter sensor malfunction on the northwest fence line near Range 8. Maintenance scheduled for after the exercise. She brought up the sensor grid overlay. The malfunctioning sensors created a blind spot roughly 200 meters wide. The SEALs would pass directly through that area in approximately 15 minutes. It was probably nothing. Equipment malfunctions happened. The odds of anything actually being wrong were minimal. But Voss had not stayed alive through 4 combat deployments by ignoring low-probability threats. Captain Blackwell, this is Voss. I need you at the command post. He arrived within 3 minutes, his expression concerned. What have you got? She showed him the sensor malfunction, the timing, the SEAL approach route. It is probably coincidence, she said. But if I were planning an attack on this facility, I would wait until a major exercise when everyone is focused inward. And I would exploit any security gap I could find. Blackwell studied the display, his operational experience processing the same threat assessment. You think we have actual hostiles? I think we have a security vulnerability coinciding with reduced perimeter awareness during a major exercise. That combination makes me nervous. He made his decision quickly. Route the SEAL team away from that sector. Add a security patrol to check the northwest perimeter. And pull up the facility's external camera feeds for the last 6 hours. As Voss implemented his orders, she caught Thorne's voice on the radio questioning the route change. The senior chief was not happy about his carefully planned approach being altered mid-operation. Ashford overruled him. We adapt to changing conditions. That is what makes us professionals. All teams acknowledge and comply. The security patrol reached the northwest perimeter 20 minutes later. What they found made Voss's instincts crystallize into cold certainty. Fresh tire tracks outside the fence. Signs of surveillance equipment recently removed. And most damning, 3 small charges placed along the fence line, designed to blow the barrier and create an entry point. The patrol leader's voice crackled over the radio, professional but tense. Command post, we have evidence of hostile reconnaissance and possible attack preparation. Recommend we go to full alert status. The command post erupted into controlled chaos. Blackwell immediately contacted base security at the main installation 40 miles away, requesting backup. Ashford recalled his SEAL team to defensive positions around the facility. Support staff were moved to secure locations. But Voss's mind was already racing ahead. Whoever had planned this knew about the exercise, knew the security would be focused on the internal training area, knew exactly when to exploit the sensor malfunction. This was not random. This was targeted. She pulled up the external camera feeds, scrolling back through the overnight footage. There, at 05:45 hours, a vehicle approaching the perimeter. It stopped just outside camera range, but she could see the heat signature on the infrared overlay. For individuals, they spent 18 minutes near the fence, then departed. But they did not go far. She tracked their heat signatures to a position approximately 1 kilometer northwest of the facility. They were still out there, watching, waiting. Captain, Voss said, her voice cutting through the radio traffic. The hostiles are still in the area. 1 kilometer northwest, using the ridgeline for concealment. How can you possibly know that? Thorne demanded, his skepticism finally boiling over. You are watching monitors in a trailer. You cannot see. Voss ignored him, focusing on Blackwell. Sir, we need to assume they are observing the facility. They know we found their charges. They know we are on alert. The question is whether they abort or escalate. Ashford's voice came through, calm despite the situation. What would you do, Corporal, if you were planning this operation? The question hung in the air. Everyone in the command post was listening now. Even Thorne had gone quiet, waiting to hear what the range maintenance officer would say about tactical operations. Voss studied the map, her combat experience rising to the surface like it had never been buried. If I were them, I would have a secondary plan. The charges were probably meant to look like the primary approach, but they would have known we might find them. So where would the real attack come from? Her finger moved across the map, tracing possibilities. The southeast approach. It has natural concealment from the terrain, and our cameras have limited coverage there because of the angle. If they split their force, they could have observers to the northwest and attackers approaching from the southeast. Blackwell looked at Ashford. Commander, this is your call. Do we treat this as a real threat or wait for backup? Ashford did not hesitate. We treat it as real. Senior Chief, take 4 men and set up observation on the southeast approach. Weapons hot, but do not engage unless directly threatened. Everyone else, defensive positions around critical infrastructure. As the SEALs moved to execute his orders, Thorne paused at the command post door. He looked at Voss, really looked at her, for the first time since arriving at the facility. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between suspicion and reluctant respect. You see things, he said quietly, things that most people miss. That is not normal for a range maintenance officer. No, Voss replied, meeting his eyes. It is not. Who are you really, Corporal Voss? Before she could answer, Sullivan's voice exploded over the radio. Southeast approach. We have 4 armed individuals moving toward the facility perimeter. They're carrying what looks like explosives and automatic weapons. All units, Ashford commanded. We have confirmed hostile presence. This is now a real-world situation. Engage if threatened, but try to contain until backup arrives. Voss watched the monitors as the situation transformed from training exercise to actual security crisis. The SEALs moved with practiced efficiency, their training seamlessly transitioning to reality. But she knew how quickly these situations could deteriorate, knew how one miscalculation, one moment of hesitation or aggression could turn a contained situation into a bloodbath. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that her carefully constructed hiding place had just been completely destroyed. Because when the shooting started, and it would start, everyone would see exactly what Corporal Linnea Voss could do when pushed beyond the point of concealment. The 4 hostile individuals moved with military precision through the desert terrain, their approach methodical and practiced. Voss tracked them on the monitor feeds, her mind automatically analyzing their formation, their weapons handling, their tactical spacing. These were not amateurs. They were trained operators conducting a deliberate assault. Sullivan's team had eyes on them from an elevated position 300 meters away, but the SEALs were under strict orders to observe and contain rather than engage. Backup was inbound from the main base, but it would take at least 20 minutes to arrive. 20 minutes was an eternity in a gunfight. The hostiles reached the perimeter fence at a point where the terrain provided natural concealment from most observation posts. Voss watched as one of them produced bolt cutters and began working on the chain link. They would be inside the facility in less than 2 minutes. Captain Blackwell was on the radio coordinating the response. All personnel to defensive positions. Medical teams stand by. We contain until backup arrives unless directly engaged. But Voss was already calculating worst-case scenarios. If the hostiles reached the ammunition storage building, they could cause catastrophic damage. If they reached the operations center, they could access classified information. And if they were willing to conduct a daylight assault on a military facility, they were either desperate or fanatically committed. Neither option suggested they would surrender peacefully. She pulled up the facility layout on her main screen, overlaying it with personnel positions and likely hostile objectives. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, adjusting camera angles, bringing up thermal imaging, creating a comprehensive tactical picture. Ruth watched her work, seeing something she had probably suspected but never confirmed. "You have done this before." Commanded operations. Voss did not look away from the screens. Different life. Different person. The fence breach completed. The 4 hostiles were inside the perimeter now, moving toward the main facility complex with clear purpose. Sullivan's team tracked them but held position as ordered. The tension in the radio traffic was palpable. Then everything changed. One of the hostiles pulled something from his pack. Even on the grainy camera feed, Voss recognized it immediately. A shoulder-fired rocket launcher, and he was aiming it at the fuel storage tanks that sat 200 meters from his position. If those tanks went up, the explosion would be catastrophic. She keyed the radio without hesitation. "All units, hostile with RPG targeting fuel storage. Sullivan, you are authorized to engage. Take that shot now." But Sullivan's voice came back tight with stress. Negative. I do not have a clean angle. The tank is directly behind the target. If I miss or overpenetrate, I could hit the fuel." Voss looked at the angle on her monitor. He was right. From his position, any shot risked exactly the outcome they were trying to prevent. The other SEAL positions were too far or had even worse angles. In approximately 15 seconds, that hostile would fire and dozens of people would die in a resulting explosion and fire. Her mind raced through options. There was one position that had a clean shot. Range 7 observation tower, 800 meters from the hostile's current position. Clear line of sight. No risk of hitting the fuel tanks. But the tower was unmanned. The closest personnel were in defensive positions 300 meters away. Except for her. She was only 100 meters from range 7. Captain Blackwell was already issuing orders to evacuate personnel away from the fuel storage area. Ashford was repositioning his teams for a different angle. But there was no time. Voss could see the hostile settling into firing position, his finger moving toward the trigger. She was moving before she made the conscious decision. Out of the command post, sprinting across the open ground toward range 7. Ruth's voice called after her, but she did not stop. Could not stop. The tower stairs blurred beneath her feet. She reached the observation deck in seconds, her eyes already scanning for what she needed. There, a designated marksman rifle, left by one of the safety officers during the morning setup. She grabbed it, checked the chamber, confirmed the optic zero was set for 800 meters. All of this took perhaps 10 seconds, maybe less. Muscle memory and training overriding conscious thought. She moved to the window, brought the rifle up, found her shooting position. The hostile was in her scope now. 800 meters. Wind, maybe 5 miles per hour from the east. Downhill angle, approximately 15 degrees. She made the adjustments automatically, her body remembering what her mind had tried to forget. "Corporal Voss, what are you doing?" Blackwell's voice crackled over her radio. She keyed the mic clipped to her vest. "Taking a shot, sir. Stand down. That is an order. You're not authorized for." The hostile's finger tightened on the RPG trigger. Voss breathed out slowly, let her heart rate settle, found that perfect moment between heartbeats where the world went still and quiet. Squeezed the trigger with gentle, relentless pressure. The rifle cracked, the recoil familiar and almost comforting against her shoulder. 800 meters away, the hostile dropped, the RPG slipping from his hands, unfired. One shot, one kill, clean and precise and utterly undeniable. The radio exploded with traffic, confused voices, urgent questions. Sullivan confirming the hostile was down. Ashford demanding to know who fired. Thorne's voice rising above the chaos with a single question that cut through everything else. Who the hell made that shot? Voss was already transitioning to the next threat. The 3 remaining hostiles had gone aground, using whatever cover they could find. They knew they were being engaged by a precision shooter now. Their entire tactical picture had changed. She found the second hostile through her scope. He was trying to reach a position behind a concrete barrier. 700 meters. Moving target. Higher difficulty, but still well within her capability. Second shot. Second kill. The hostile fell mid-stride. Now the radio went silent. Everyone was watching. Everyone was trying to understand what they were witnessing. A range maintenance corporal making shots that most trained snipers would struggle with, making them look effortless. The third hostile made a critical mistake. He broke from cover, trying to reach his fallen comrade, probably attempting to recover the RPG. Voss tracked him smoothly, led the target, adjusted for movement. Third shot. Third kill. The final hostile showed better tactical sense. He stayed hidden behind a vehicle, using the engine block for cover. Smart, patient, waiting for backup or an opening, or perhaps just hoping the situation would somehow improve. Sullivan's voice came through, professional despite the shock underlying his words. Last hostile is pinned behind the maintenance vehicle. We can move to engage. But Commander Ashford's response was directed elsewhere. Corporal Voss, do you have a shot? She studied the target through her scope. The hostile was well covered. Only his shoulder and part of his head were visible, and that only intermittently as he shifted position. Difficult shot, but not impossible. Approximately 850 meters. Vehicle distorting the heat signature slightly. Required patience in the right moment. Negative on clean shot, sir, Voss replied. Target is 90% covered, but if he moves, I can take him. So they waited. The facility was locked down now. The threat was contained. Backup would arrive in less than 10 minutes. The smart play was to wait, maintain overwatch, let the assault team handle the final hostile when they arrived. But the hostile made his choice. Maybe he knew he was surrounded. Maybe he preferred death to capture. Maybe he was just committed to his mission above all else. Whatever the reason, he broke from cover with his sidearm, firing at Sullivan's position as he ran toward the fuel tanks. Voss tracked him. 870 meters now. Target moving at approximately 15 miles per hour at an angle. She led him, calculated the movement, found the perfect moment. Fourth shot. The hostile dropped 30 meters from the fuel tanks, his weapon falling from lifeless hands. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Sullivan's voice, quiet with something that sounded like reverence. All hostiles down. Threat neutralized. 4 from 800 plus meters. That was impossible shooting. Not impossible, Matsuda's voice replied. Just impossible for anyone we thought we knew. Voss safed the rifle and set it down with care. Her hands were steady, her breathing normal. She felt calm in a way she had not felt in 2 years. The clarity that came from doing what you were built to do, what you trained for, what you were excellent at regardless of the cost. She descended the tower stairs to find Captain Blackwell waiting at the bottom. His expression was complicated. Relief and concern and a dozen other emotions she could not quite identify. You save a lot of lives today, Corporal, he said quietly. I did my job, sir. That was considerably more than your job. That was world-class marksmanship under combat conditions. That was the work of someone with significant operational experience. She met his eyes. Yes, sir. It was. The SEALs were approaching now, moving across the facility toward Range 7. Toward her. Ashford in the lead, Thorne beside him, Sullivan and Matsuda, and the others following. All of them with the same question written across their faces. Who are you really? And this time, Voss knew there would be no deflecting, no hiding, no pretending to be less than what she was. Because you could not make shots like that and remain invisible. You could not save dozens of lives and fade back into obscurity. You could not be excellent and expect people not to notice. Her refuge was gone, her hiding place destroyed. And as she watched the SEALs approach, saw the respect and curiosity and demand for truth in their eyes, Linnea Voss realized that maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what needed to happen. Commander Ashford reached Range 7 first, his eyes moving from Voss to the rifle she had used, then to the distant positions where 4 bodies now lay. His expression was carefully controlled, but she could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. Distance, conditions, difficulty, impossibility made real. For shots, for kills, he said. 800 meters plus. moving targets on two of them, in combat conditions with lives on the line. That is not luck, Corporal. That is world-class skill. Thorne stood beside him, his weathered face unreadable. He picked up the rifle Voss had used, checked the chamber, examined the optic. Standard equipment. Nothing special, which makes what you just did even more remarkable. The rest of the SEAL team formed a loose semicircle around her. No hostility in their postures now. Just intense curiosity mixed with the kind of respect that operators reserved for proven capability. Sullivan looked like he was seeing her for the first time. Matsuda wore an expression that suggested his suspicions had been confirmed in the most dramatic way possible. Captain Blackwell arrived with base security personnel, the situation transitioning from active threat to secured crime scene. Federal agents would be inbound to process the scene and identify the hostiles. But right now, all attention was focused on the woman who had just saved potentially dozens of lives with 4 perfect shots. I think, Ashford said carefully, that we need to have a conversation about exactly who Corporal Linnea Voss is, because range maintenance officers do not shoot like that. Voss looked at Blackwell, who gave her a slight nod. Permission to speak freely. Permission to finally tell the truth she had been hiding for 2 years. Before this assignment, I was operational, she said. Sniper qualified. Multiple deployments. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. I held the unit record for longest confirmed kill at 2,100 meters. I was assigned to a special operations task force conducting high-value target elimination. The silence that followed was complete. Even the wind seemed to still, waiting for her to continue. Why are you here cleaning ranges? Sullivan asked, his voice holding no judgment, only genuine confusion. Because I was very good at my job, Voss replied quietly. Too good. I never missed, never failed a mission, never let my team down, until the day I made a shot that I will carry for the rest of my life. She paused, the memories flooding back despite her best efforts to contain them. A village in the Hindu Kush, a high-value target surrounded by civilians. Intel saying he was planning an attack that would kill hundreds. Orders to take the shot if an opportunity presented itself. There was a child, she continued, her voice steady despite the weight of the words. Used as a human shield. I did not see them until after I fired. The round went through the target as intended. But the child was there, and I killed them both. The SEALs understood immediately. Every operator who had served in combat zones had faced impossible choices, situations where every option led to tragedy. But knowing the necessity did not make carrying it any easier. The shot was ruled justified, Voss said. The intel was solid. The target was eliminated. The attack was prevented. Everyone told me I did the right thing, that I saved lives. But the child's death was on the enemy who used them as a shield, not on me. But you do not believe that, Matsuda said quietly. I believe it intellectually. But believing something in your mind and accepting in your heart are different things. I started having panic attacks during missions. My hand would shake. I could not trust my own judgment anymore. So I requested reassignment before I got someone on my team killed. Ashford nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. And you chose range maintenance because it let you stay in service without having to carry a rifle operationally. I thought if I could just step away from it, if I could just be around the work without having to do the work, maybe I could find some kind of peace. Maybe I could serve without having to kill. Thorne spoke for the first time since she began her explanation. But you never stopped being a sniper. The skills did not go away. The instincts did not disappear. You just buried them. I tried to bury them, Voss corrected. But apparently not deep enough. Ruth appeared at the edge of the group, medical supplies in hand, checking to make sure Voss was uninjured. The older woman's eyes held understanding and something else. Pride, maybe, or satisfaction at seeing someone finally step back into who they truly were. The sound of approaching helicopters interrupted the moment. Federal response teams arriving to secure the scene and begin their investigation. The facility would be locked down for days while every detail was examined and documented. But right now, in this moment before the machinery of official response took over, there was just a small group of warriors acknowledging one of their own. What you did today Saved lives, Ashford said. Not just the people who would have died in an explosion, but everyone here who would have been caught in the firefight that would have followed. You saw the threat before anyone else. You positioned yourself to counter it, and you executed perfectly under pressure. That is exactly what special operations is supposed to be. Sullivan stepped forward, extending his hand. I owe you my life, Corporal. If you had not made those shots, I was in the direct blast radius of that RPG. Thank you does not cover it, but thank you. She shook his hand, seeing genuine gratitude in his eyes. The rest of the team followed, each offering their respect in the quiet way that operators acknowledge debt and excellence. Even Thorne approached, his expression softened from the skepticism he had carried since arriving at the facility. I misjudged you, he said. Made assumptions based on your assignment rather than your capability. That was my failure, not yours. You had no reason to think otherwise, Voss replied. I worked very hard to make sure nobody would. But why? He asked. Why hide talent like that? Why waste it on maintenance work when you could be operational, making a real difference? Because making a difference has a cost, Senior Chief, and I already paid more than I could afford. The federal agents were moving toward them now, ready to begin the formal debrief process. But before the moment ended, Ashford spoke one more time. When this is over, when the investigation is complete and things settle down, I want to talk to you about opportunities. There are units that could use someone with your skills. Units that understand the cost of excellence and have systems in place to help operators manage it. Voss did not commit either way, but she nodded acknowledgement. The idea of returning to operational status terrified her. But something had shifted today. She had carried a rifle again, had made impossible shots under combat pressure, had saved lives instead of taking them in ways she regretted. Maybe there was a path forward that did not require her to be either fully operational or completely hidden. Maybe there was a middle ground where she could use her skills without being consumed by them. Maybe redemption was not about running from who you were, but about finding a way to be that person without losing yourself in the process. The federal agents separated them for individual interviews. Voss would spend the next several hours recounting every detail of the engagement, justifying every decision, explaining her background and capabilities. It would be exhausting and invasive and probably trigger a review of her psychological fitness for duty. But as she walked toward the interview area, she caught Matsuda's eye. He gave her a slight nod, the kind of acknowledgement that said, I knew you were more than you appeared. And for the first time in 2 years, Voss did not feel the need to deny it. She was Corporal Linnea Voss, Range Maintenance Officer. But she was also something more. Something she had tried to bury, but could not kill. A warrior. A protector. A woman who possessed extraordinary skills and had finally, reluctantly, necessarily, used them to save lives instead of taking them. The shooting had changed everything. The careful construct of her hidden life was demolished. But standing in the Nevada desert with the weight of 4 righteous kills on her conscience, instead of the weight of one tragic mistake, Voss realized that maybe, just maybe, that demolition was exactly what she had needed. Not to go back to who she was, but to find a way to move forward as someone new. Someone who could carry both the excellence and the cost. Someone who could be lethal when necessary, but human always. Someone who understood that redemption was not about forgetting the past, but about ensuring the future held more moments like today and fewer like the one that drove her into hiding. The sun was setting over the ranges, painting the desert in shades of amber and gold. Voss took one last look at Range 7, the place where she had tried to disappear, before turning toward whatever came next. She did not know what that would be, but for the first time in a long time, she was ready to find out. The investigation consumed 3 days. Federal agents interviewed everyone multiple times, reconstructed the engagement from every angle, analyzed the hostile organization's planning and objectives. The 4 attackers were identified as members of a domestic extremist group that had been targeting military installations across the western United States. The facility had been chosen specifically because intelligence suggested it housed classified training programs worth disrupting. Voss's actions were ruled not just justified but exemplary. The investigative report used words like exceptional marksmanship and decisive action under extreme pressure. Her psychological evaluation, conducted by a military psychiatrist flown in from Washington, concluded that while she carried trauma from her previous service, her response to the crisis demonstrated sound judgment and appropriate force escalation. But the question everyone kept asking, from federal agents to military brass to the SEALs who remained at the facility during the investigation, was the same question Voss had been asking herself for 2 years. What happens next? She sat in Captain Blackwell's office on the 4th day after the incident, the morning sun streaming through the window behind his desk. He had coffee waiting for her, the good kind he kept in his personal stash, and his expression carried both concern and something that looked like paternal pride. "You have options," he said without preamble. "The official report gives you cover to return to operational status if you choose. Multiple units have already submitted requests for your transfer. Some of them are very high-speed organizations that do not usually recruit from range maintenance rosters." Voss sipped her coffee, buying herself a moment. "And if I choose to stay here, then you stay here. Your position is secure. Nobody is going to force you into anything. But Linnea, I have to ask, is that really what you want? To go back to hiding after proving you do not need to hide anymore?" "I was not hiding," she said, then stopped herself. "That is not true. I was absolutely hiding. But I had good reasons. You had understandable reasons." "Good is debatable." Blackwell leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "You made a tragic decision in an impossible situation. A child died. That will always be true, and it will always hurt. But you also saved 12 lives that day, and dozens more last week. The math does not make the tragedy disappear, but it matters. Does it? Because I still see that child's face every time I close my eyes. And you probably always will. That is the cost of being good at this work. But the question is not whether you can erase the cost. It is whether you can carry it while still doing work that matters. Work that saves lives instead of just processing brass and maintaining equipment." Before Voss could respond, there was a knock on the door. Commander Ashford entered, followed by Senior Chief Thorne. Both men looked serious, and she noticed they were in full dress uniforms rather than the tactical gear they had worn throughout their training cycle. "Corporal Voss," Ashford said, "thank you for meeting with us. I know the last few days have been intense, but we wanted to speak with you before our team departs tomorrow." They sat, and the office suddenly felt crowded with the weight of whatever conversation was about to happen. "The SEAL community is relatively small," Ashford continued. "Word travels fast about operators who demonstrate exceptional capability. Your actions last week have generated significant interest from several special warfare units. But before you feel those offers, I wanted to extend one directly." He pulled a folder from his briefcase and placed it on Blackwell's desk. "Our unit is developing a new program. Precision engagement specialists embedded with SEAL teams for operations requiring extreme range marksmanship. We need people who can make impossible shots in combat conditions. People who understand not just the mechanics of shooting, but the psychology of operating in life-or-death situations." "You want me to be a sniper again?" Voss said. "Not exactly." Thorne spoke up, his voice carrying none of the dismissiveness from their first meeting. "We want you to be a force multiplier, someone who can eliminate threats that conventional engagement methods cannot reach, but also someone who can train others, share expertise, raise the capability of entire teams. The position would be operational," Ashford added, "but with built-in support systems. Regular psychological evaluation. Mandatory counseling after combat engagements. A command structure that understands the cost of this work and takes responsibility for helping operators manage it." Voss looked at the folder, but did not reach for it. "What you're describing sounds like you want me to do exactly what broke me before, but with more paperwork and therapy sessions." Thorne shook his head. "What broke you before was being alone with impossible decisions and inadequate support. This program is designed specifically to prevent that. You would not be making life-or-death calls in isolation. You would have a team. You would have resources. You would have leadership that understands the weight of what we ask our people to carry. And if I fail again, If I freeze up on a mission? If I make another mistake that costs an innocent life? Ashford's expression was understanding but unyielding. Then you would be human. Operators fail sometimes. We make mistakes. We carry guilt. The question is not whether you are perfect. It is whether you are capable despite your imperfection. And last week, you proved conclusively that you are. Voss stood, moving to the window, looking out across the ranges where she had spent 2 years trying to disappear. She could see Range 7 from here, the observation tower where she had made 4 shots that saved dozens of lives. The place where her carefully constructed refuge had been destroyed. I came here because I could not trust myself anymore, she said quietly. Because I was afraid that my next shot would kill another innocent person. That my judgment was compromised. That I was more dangerous than useful. And now? Blackwell asked. Now I know that I could still shoot. That the skills did not disappear. That when lives are on the line, I can perform. But I'm not sure that is the same as being healed. Being capable does not mean being whole. Nobody is asking you to be whole, Thorne said, his voice surprisingly gentle. We are all carrying something. Every operator in special warfare has made decisions they regret, has seen things they wish they could unsee. The difference between the ones who keep serving and the ones who break is not whether they hurt. It is whether they can carry the hurt while still doing the work. Matsuda appeared in the doorway, hesitating when he saw the office was occupied. Sullivan stood behind him, both young operators looking uncertain about interrupting. Come in, Ashford said. You are part of this conversation, too. The 2 SEALs entered, and Sullivan spoke first. We just wanted to say, before we ship out tomorrow, that what you did saved my life specifically. That RPG was aimed at a position I was occupying. If you had not made that shot, I would not be standing here. Matsuda nodded. And more than that, you changed how we think about capability and judgment. We all looked at you and saw someone doing a basic job. We never looked deeper, never questioned our assumptions. You taught us that excellence can exist anywhere, in anyone, if we are willing to see it. Ruth appeared in the doorway as well, her presence adding another layer to the conversation. She did not speak, just stood there with her arms crossed, her expression saying everything that needed to be said. You have people who believe in you, who see your worth, who know that what you are is more important than what you did in one tragic moment. Voss felt the weight of all these eyes on her, all these people who had seen her at her worst hiding and her best performing, all of them offering her a path forward if she could find the courage to take it. I need time, she finally said, to think about this, to figure out if I could do operational work without losing myself again. Take the time you need, Ashford replied. The offer stands for as long as you need to decide. But Voss, one more thing. He stood, moving to face her directly. Redemption is not about erasing mistakes. It is about ensuring that your mistakes do not define your entire legacy. You have a chance to build a legacy of lives saved, teams protected, missions accomplished. That does not erase the child you killed, but it balances the scales in ways that hiding never could. After they left, Voss remained in Blackwell's office, staring at the folder Ashford had left behind. The sun had climbed higher now, burning away the cool morning air and replacing it with the familiar desert heat. Through the window, she could see the ranges stretching out into the distance, each one a reminder of a life she had chosen and the life she had left behind. The brass still needed collecting. The equipment still needed maintenance. The ranges still needed someone to keep them operational. She could stay here, continue the work she had been doing, return to the comfortable anonymity of support roles and mundane tasks. But she could also acknowledge what everyone else already knew. That Corporal Linnea Voss was more than a range maintenance officer. That her skills were too valuable to waste. That her excellence, even purchased at terrible cost, was worth more in action than in hiding. She picked up the folder, did not open it yet, just held it, feeling the weight of possibility and responsibility and the future that waited if she was brave enough to reach for it. The decision would not be easy. Nothing about this path ever had been. But standing in that office, surrounded by people who saw her truly and still believe in her worth, Voss realized that maybe courage was not about being unafraid. Maybe it was about being terrified and moving forward anyway. About carrying your failures and still finding a way to succeed. About accepting that you were broken and discovering that broken things could still be useful, still be valuable, still be enough. That night, Voss found herself walking the perimeter of the facility under a sky full of stars. The desert air had cooled, carrying the scent of sage and dust. Her boots crunched on gravel as she moved past the ranges, each one holding memories of the life she had built here. A quiet life, a safe life, a life where excellence was something she observed in others rather than demanded of herself. She ended up at Range 7, standing in the exact spot where she had made 4 shots that changed everything. The observation tower loomed above her, dark and silent. No one had used it since the incident. Maybe they were waiting for her decision. Maybe they understood that this place had become something more than just a training facility. It had become the point where her past and future intersected. The sound of boots on gravel made her turn. Thorn approached slowly, his hands in his pockets, his bearing relaxed in a way she had never seen during the training cycle. He stopped a respectful distance away, looking up at the tower. "Cannot sleep either?" he asked. "Too much to think about." He nodded, understanding implicit. "I owe you an apology. A real one. Not just the polite acknowledgement I gave after you saved our lives." "You already apologized, Senior Chief." "No, I acknowledge that I misjudged you. That is different from understanding why I misjudged you and what that says about me." He turned to face her directly. "I spent 23 years in special warfare. Saw combat across 4 continents. Built a reputation as someone who could shoot better than almost anyone in the community. And I let that reputation make me arrogant. You had reason to be confident in your skills. Confidence is different from arrogance. Confidence is knowing what you can do. Arrogance is assuming nobody else can do it better. When I arrived here and saw you cleaning ranges, I made assumptions. Decided you were support staff because you could not hack it operationally. Never occurred to me that you might be here by choice. That you might be carrying something that made you choose obscurity over recognition. Most people make the same assumption. That does not excuse it. Thorn looked back at the tower. I watched the investigation footage. Saw the analysis of your shots. The angles, the wind conditions, the stress factors. You know what the federal ballistics expert said? He said those shots were textbook perfect, except there is no textbook for making them under those conditions. You were operating on pure instinct and thousands of hours of experience. I was operating on fear, Voss said quietly. Fear that if I did not make those shots, people would die. The same fear that has kept me awake every night for 2 years. Fear is a tool if you know how to use it. The question is whether you let it control you or whether you control it. And from where I stood, you were absolutely in control. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, 2 warriors who understood the weight of excellence and the cost of carrying it. Finally, Thorn spoke again. "Commander Ashford offered you a position. I assume he explained the program we are building." He did. What he might not have explained is why we are building it. 3 years ago, we lost an operator during a hostage rescue. Exceptional shooter, one of the best I ever worked with. He froze up during a critical moment because he was carrying trauma from a previous mission. No support systems in place. No one checking to see if he was still functional. He hesitated for 2 seconds, and those 2 seconds cost him his life and nearly cost us the hostages. I am sorry. We all were. But more than that, we were angry. Angry that we had failed him. That the system had pushed him to keep operating when he needed help. That we valued his skills more than his well-being. So we made a commitment to build something better. A program where operators are not just tools to be used until they break. Where psychological support is not something you seek after you fail, but something that is built into the structure from the beginning. And you think that program would have helped me? Would have prevented what happened in Afghanistan? I think it would have given you people to talk to before you had to make that impossible shot. People who could have helped you process the trauma after, instead of leaving you alone with it until it destroyed you from the inside. Voss felt something crack inside her, a wall she had maintained for 2 years suddenly showing fractures. I did not want to talk about it. Did not want to appear weak. Did not want anyone to know that I was breaking. That is exactly the problem we're trying to fix. The culture that says seeking help is weakness. That says operators have to be invulnerable. That says carrying trauma alone is somehow more honorable than sharing the load. What if I join your program and I fail again? What if I freeze up on a mission and someone dies because I was not strong enough? Then we would carry that failure together. As a team. As a unit. The way it should have been from the beginning. Thorne's voice was firm but compassionate. Nobody operates alone, Voss. Not really. We tell ourselves we do because it makes the burden feel more manageable. But the truth is that every operator is part of a larger system. And when that system fails to support its people, everyone fails. She turned to look at him fully, seeing past the weathered face and gray beard to the man underneath. A man who had made mistakes, who carried his own trauma, who had learned that excellence without support was a recipe for destruction. Why are you telling me this? Why does it matter to you whether I take the position or not? Because I see myself in you. The person I was 15 years ago, before I learned that asking for help was not weakness. Before I understood that carrying trauma alone does not make you stronger. It just makes you more isolated. And because I know that if you walk away from this, if you stay hidden in a job that does not challenge you, you will spend the rest of your life wondering what you could have been. What if being challenged is what breaks me completely? What if not being challenged is what is breaking you right now? He gestured toward the ranges, the facility, the life she had built. Is this really peace, Voss? Or is it just a different kind of prison? One where you serve your sentence by denying who you are and what you are capable of? The question hung in the air between them, sharp and undeniable. Voss had told herself for 2 years that she had found peace in obscurity, that the quiet life of range maintenance was healing her, that if she just stayed hidden long enough, the nightmares would stop and the guilt would fade. But Thorne was right. This was not peace. This was avoidance. And avoidance was not the same as healing. I am afraid, she admitted, the words costing her more than any shot she had ever made. Afraid that I am not strong enough for operational work anymore. Afraid that I will make another terrible decision. Afraid that excellence comes with a price I cannot afford to pay again. Everyone in special warfare is afraid, Thorne replied. The ones who say they are not are either lying or too stupid to understand the stakes. Fear is not the problem. The problem is letting fear make your decisions for you. He started to walk away, then paused. The team ships out at Ohide Hunter tomorrow. If you decide you want to accept Ashford's offer, we will make room for you. If you decide to stay here, we will respect that choice. But whatever you decide, decide it honestly. Not based on fear, not based on guilt, based on who you actually are and what you actually need. After he left, Voss climbed the stairs to the observation deck one more time. From here, she could see the entire facility spread out before her. 12 ranges, multiple buildings, the perimeter fence where hostile forces had breached just days ago, and beyond it all, the vast Nevada desert stretching to the horizon. She thought about the child in Afghanistan, thought about the 12 lives saved that day and the dozens saved last week, thought about the brass she had collected and the equipment she had maintained and the quiet obscurity she had wrapped around herself like armor. She thought about Ashford's offer, about Thorne's challenge, about Matsuda's respect and Sullivan's gratitude and Ruth's knowing smile, about Captain Blackwell's patient support and the folder sitting on her bunk with all its implications and possibilities. And she thought about the 4 shots she had made from this very spot, the clarity she had felt, the certainty, the absolute knowledge that she was doing exactly what she was built to do, regardless of the cost. Maybe that was the truth she had been running from. Not that she was broken, not that she had made an unforgivable mistake, but that excellence was part of who she was, as fundamental as breathing. And trying to suppress it, trying to hide from it, was not healing. It was just slow suffocation. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and indifferent. The desert wind carried the scent of possibilities. And Corporal Linnea Voss stood in the place where she had proven she was more than she pretended to be and made her decision. Dawn came early to the Nevada desert, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Voss stood outside the operations building at Osaventhirty, a single duffel bag at her feet. Inside that bag were the contents of her locker, including the wooden box with the photograph and the range card and the challenge coin. Everything that mattered from 2 years of hiding. The SEAL team was conducting final equipment checks near their vehicles, preparing for departure. Captain Blackwell stood with Commander Ashford, the two men deep in conversation. Ruth watched from the doorway of the supply building, her expression hopeful but resigned to whatever choice Voss had made. Matsuda noticed her first. He said something to Sullivan, who looked up and nudged Thorne. Within seconds, the entire team was watching, waiting to see what she would do, whether she would walk toward them or walk away. Voss picked up her duffel bag. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm. She had spent the entire night thinking, weighing, calculating, not with logic or fear, but with something deeper, something that understood the difference between running away and moving forward. She walked toward the SEAL team. Ashford saw her coming and separated from Blackwell, meeting her halfway across the compound. His expression revealed nothing, but she could see the question in his eyes. "I read the folder," she said. "All of it. The mission parameters, the support structure, the psychological protocols. It is thorough, more thorough than anything I have seen in special operations." "We learn from our mistakes," Ashford replied. "The hard way. I need you to understand something before I give you my answer. I'm not the operator I was 2 years ago. I have scars that do not show, wounds that have not healed. I might freeze up. I might make mistakes. I might need more support than your program is designed to provide. Understood. Anything else? I will never forget the child I killed. That will always be part of who I am. And there may be days when that memory makes me question every decision, every shot, every mission. I cannot promise you an operator without doubts." "I'm not asking for an operator without doubts," Ashford said. "I am asking for an operator with exceptional skills who is honest about her limitations. Someone who will ask for help when she needs it instead of suffering in silence until she breaks. Can you be that operator?" Voss met his eyes, seeing the sincerity there, the genuine commitment to building something better than what had destroyed so many warriors before. A system that valued the person as much as the performance, that understood excellence and trauma could coexist if properly supported. "I could try," she said. "That is the best answer I can give you. That is the only answer I need. Welcome to the team, Corporal Voss." He extended his hand, and she shook it, feeling the weight of commitment settle on her shoulders. Different from the weight she had carried before. Not lighter, exactly, but distributed differently, shared instead of solitary. The team gathered around, offering congratulations and welcomes. Sullivan clapped her on the shoulder with genuine enthusiasm. Matsuda smiled in a way that suggested he had known all along what her decision would be. Even Thorne looked pleased, his earlier skepticism completely transformed into something that looked like mentorship. Captain Blackwell approached last, his expression complicated. Pride mixed with concern, mixed with the sadness of losing someone he had protected for 2 years. "This is the right choice," he said quietly, "even if it is hard to see you go. Thank you for giving me a place to heal, sir. For not pushing me before I was ready. For understanding what I needed, even when I did not understand it myself. You did the healing, Voss. I just provided the space for it to happen." He paused, then added, "And if you ever need to come back, if operational life becomes too much again, this place will always have a position for you." "I know, sir, but I think the time for hiding is over." Ruth appeared with coffee and breakfast sandwiches, her practical nature asserting itself even in emotional moments. "You all need to eat before that long drive. And Voss, you especially. You are too thin. Nobody told me to worry about you while you were busy being mysterious and traumatized." The comment broke the tension, drawing laughs from the SEALs and a genuine smile from Voss. She accepted the food gratefully, realizing she had barely eaten in days. Too much thinking, too much deciding, too much confronting the person she had been and the person she was becoming. They ate together in the morning sun, the team already integrating her into their dynamic. The conversation flowed naturally, moving from mission planning to equipment preferences to the kind of casual banter that soldiers use to build bonds. Voss found herself participating, offering observations and occasional jokes, feeling the ice around her heart beginning to thaw. As they prepared to load vehicles, Thorne pulled her aside one more time. One more thing you should know. The program requires all operators to participate in regular counseling sessions, not just after difficult missions, but ongoing. Weekly check-ins, monthly deep dives. It is mandatory, not optional. Good, Voss said. I should have sought help 2 years ago instead of running. Most of us should have sought help years before we did. The trick is recognizing it now and committing to doing better. He handed her a folder, different from the one Ashford had given her. This is information about the counselor assigned to our unit. Former operator herself. Understands the work from the inside. I want you to contact her before our first training cycle begins. I will. I'm not asking, Corporal. I'm telling you. This is a direct order from your new team leader. You will contact her. You will attend sessions. You will be honest about what you are carrying. Understood? The firmness in his voice carried no judgment. Only the kind of authority that came from caring about his people. Voss recognized it for what it was. Leadership that valued the whole person, not just the skill set. Understood, Senior Chief. Good. Now get your gear loaded. We have a long drive ahead, and I want to make the base by 1500 hours. The convoy pulled out at Ohite 15, 3 vehicles heading east toward the main highway. Voss sat in the middle vehicle, wedged between Matsuda and Sullivan, her duffel bag at her feet. Through the window, she watched the facility recede into the distance. Range 7, the observation tower, the place where she had tried to disappear and the place where she had been forced back into the light. Captain Blackwell and Ruth stood outside the operations building, watching them leave. Blackwell raised his hand in salute, and Voss returned it through the window. A farewell to the life she was leaving behind. An acknowledgement of the sanctuary it had provided when she needed it most. As the facility disappeared from view, replaced by empty desert and distant mountains, Voss felt something shift inside her. Not healing exactly. Not yet. But the beginning of it. The first steps toward integrating who she had been with who she was becoming. Toward accepting that the child in Afghanistan would always be part of her story, but did not have to be the end of her story. Matsuda noticed her expression. You okay? She considered the question honestly. I'm not sure, but I think maybe that is okay too. Being uncertain, being afraid, being broken and functional at the same time. That is pretty much the definition of being an operator, Sullivan said from her other side. We are all broken. The question is whether we can still do the work despite it. Or maybe because of it, Voss replied. Maybe being broken gives us perspective, makes us more careful, more thoughtful, more aware of the cost of what we do. Now you are thinking like someone who will make us all better, Matsuda said, not just as a shooter, but as a team member. Someone who understands that excellence without wisdom is just violence with better aim. The convoy drove on through the morning, eating miles of desert highway. Voss closed her eyes, feeling the sun warm her face through the window. For the first time in 2 years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that did not revolve around hiding. A future where she could be excellent and broken simultaneously, where she could carry her trauma and still serve, where redemption was not about forgetting the past, but about ensuring the future held more light than darkness. She did not know if she would succeed, did not know if the program would provide enough support or if her scars ran too deep, did not know if she could return to operational status without losing herself again. But she knew she had to try, because hiding had not healed her. Obscurity had not brought peace. And excellence denied was just another form of self-destruction. So she would return to the work, with support this time, with a team that understood the cost, with leadership that valued her well-being as much as her capability. And she would discover whether Corporal Linnea Voss could be both a warrior and a human being, both lethal and whole, both exceptional and acceptably broken. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, full of possibilities and dangers, and the promise of a life lived fully instead of half-hidden. And for the first time in a very long time, Voss was ready to face it. 3 weeks later, Voss stood on a different range at a different facility, this time wearing operational gear instead of a maintenance vest. The SEAL training complex in Virginia was larger and more sophisticated than the Nevada facility, with state-of-the-art equipment and ranges designed to simulate every conceivable combat environment. But the principles remained the same: wind, distance, breathing, the space between heartbeats where perfect shots lived. Commander Ashford stood beside her, observing as she worked through a qualification course designed to establish her baseline capabilities. Targets at 600, 800, 1,000, 1,200 meters. Various conditions. Time pressure. Stress factors. Everything designed to test not just her marksmanship, but her mental resilience under operational pressure. She had attended 3 counseling sessions since joining the team. Dr. Sarah Kimura, the unit psychologist, was direct and insightful in ways that made Voss uncomfortable and grateful simultaneously. They had talked about Afghanistan, about the child, about the guilt that never quite disappeared no matter how many lives she saved afterward. Dr. Kimura had told her something that stayed with her. Healing is not about erasing trauma. It is about changing your relationship to it, learning to carry it without letting it control you. You will always remember that child, but you can also remember the 12 people you saved that day, and the dozens you saved in Nevada, and all the people you will save in the future if you let yourself. Voss lined up her next shot, 1,200 meters. Wind gusting from the northwest at variable speeds. Target partially obscured by heat shimmer. She calculated, adjusted, breathed, and squeezed. The target dropped. Perfect shot, Ashford said. That makes 23 for 23. You have not missed once in 90 minutes. I had good training, Voss replied, safing her rifle. And apparently muscle memory does not forget even when you want it to. The question is not whether you can shoot. We established that in Nevada. The question is whether you can integrate with the team, whether you can communicate your capabilities and limitations honestly, whether you can ask for help when you need it. She turned to face him. I had a panic attack 2 nights ago. Woke up at 0300 hours convinced I was back in Afghanistan. Matsuda found me in the common area. I told him what happened instead of pretending I was fine. How did he respond? He sat with me until the panic passed. Did not try to fix it or minimize it. Just stayed present. Then he told me about his own nightmares. About the mission where he watched his team leader die because they were 30 seconds too slow breaching a door. We talked until sunrise. That is exactly what this program is designed to enable. Operators supporting each other through the hard moments. Being honest about the cost instead of pretending we are invulnerable. Thorne appeared from the operations building, moving toward them with his characteristic, purposeful stride. He carried a tablet, and his expression suggested important information. Commander, we have mission tasking. High-value target in Syria. Time-sensitive intelligence. They want our team because the compound is in a populated area requiring precision engagement. Minimal collateral damage tolerance. Voss felt her chest tighten. Her first operational mission since Afghanistan. Since the child. Since everything that had driven her into hiding. Ashford noticed her reaction. Corporal Voss, you're under no obligation to participate. This team has other qualified shooters. If you need more time, nobody will judge that decision. She took a breath, feeling the familiar fear rising. But alongside the fear was something else. Purpose. The knowledge that her skills could save lives if she could find the courage to use them again. Was the target profile? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Thorne pulled up the intelligence file on his tablet. Terrorist cell leader. Responsible for 3 attacks that killed over 200 civilians. Intel indicates he is planning another operation. The compound has 12 confirmed hostiles, plus an unknown number of civilians, including women and children. The word civilians, including children, hit her like a physical blow. But she did not look away, did not retreat into panic, did not let the fear make her decision. What is the shot requirement? Single target elimination through a second-story window. Estimated range 1,000 meters. Time window approximately 40 seconds when the target is confirmed alone in the room. Miss that window, and we risk civilian casualties during a full compound assault. It was exactly the kind of shot that had defined her previous career. Exactly the kind of scenario that required absolute precision and perfect judgment. Exactly the kind of mission that had haunted her nightmares for 2 years. I need to speak with Dr. Kimura before I commit, Voss said. And I need the team to understand that if I have any doubt about the shot, any concern about civilian presence, I will not take it regardless of mission pressure. Ashford nodded. That is exactly the right approach. We brief in 6 hours. That give you time to consult with the counselor and make your decision. And Voss, your conditions about civilian safety are not just acceptable, they are mandatory. We would rather abort the mission than risk another tragedy. She found Dr. Kimura in her office, the psychologist clearing her schedule immediately when Voss explained the situation. They talked for 90 minutes, working through the fear and the memories and the very real possibility that this mission could trigger everything Voss had been trying to process. "You are afraid you will freeze," Dr. Kimura said, "or that you will see that child's face and lose your ability to function." Yes, that is a reasonable fear given your history. But let me ask you something. When you made those 4 shots in Nevada, did you freeze? Did the trauma prevent you from functioning? No, but that was different. It was immediate, reactive. I did not have time to think about what could go wrong. Actually, that suggests something important. Under pressure, when lives are on the line, your training and instincts override your trauma. You perform perfectly because you were focused on saving lives, not on your past failures. But what if this time is different? What if I see civilians and I cannot take the shot? What if I fail the mission? Then you will have made a decision that prioritizes human life over mission success. And that is not failure, Voss. That is wisdom. That is the lesson you learned from Afghanistan. That some things matter more than completing the mission perfectly. The conversation continued, working through scenarios and concerns and the specific triggers Voss needed to be aware of. By the time it ended, she did not feel certain, but she felt prepared, ready to try, even if trying meant acknowledging her limitations. The mission briefing brought the entire team together. Detailed maps of the target compound, intelligence photos, entry and exit routes, medical evacuation plans. Every contingency mapped and prepared for. And at the center of it all, the single shot that would determine whether the mission succeeded with minimal risk or escalated into a dangerous full compound assault. Thorne laid out the timeline. Insertion at 2200 hours local time. Movement to Overwatch position by 23:30. Target window opens at midnight. Shot must be taken within 40 seconds or we scrub and reassess. He looked at Voss. Our primary shooter will be Corporal Voss. Secondary is Petty Officer Chun in case Voss calls off the shot for any reason. No judgment, no pressure. If the primary shooter says no, we go to secondary or we scrub. Clear? Clear, the team responded in unison. After the briefing, Sullivan approached her quietly. I know this is your first mission back. Want to talk through any concerns? She appreciated the offer more than she could express. Just promise me something. If you see me hesitating, if you think I am frozen by trauma instead of making a tactical decision, you will say something. I trust my judgment, but I also know my limitations. I promise. And Voss, for what it is worth, I trust your judgment too. You saved my life because you made the right call under impossible pressure. I believe you will do the same thing tomorrow. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of final preparations, equipment checks, and the kind of nervous energy that preceded all combat operations. Voss spent time with Dr. Kimura, reviewing coping strategies and establishing a communication plan for after the mission regardless of outcome. She called Captain Blackwell in Nevada, updating him on her status. He listened without judgment, offering support and reminding her that her value was not dependent on mission success. And she sat alone in the armory for an hour, holding her rifle, reacquainting herself with its weight and balance. This weapon would be an extension of her tomorrow, the tool through which she would either save lives or fail to save them. The difference between redemption and repetition of past tragedy. Matsuda found her there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He sat beside her without speaking, his presence comfortable and undemanding. Finally, he broke the silence. Whatever happens tomorrow, you are not alone in it. We carry the weight together. That is what teams do. She looked at him, seeing genuine care in his eyes. Thank you for seeing me when I was trying to be invisible, for respecting what I was going through, for being the kind of teammate everyone deserves. That is what you taught us. That excellence can exist in anyone if we are willing to look past our assumptions. Tomorrow, you get to show us something else. That broken people can still be warriors. That trauma and capability can coexist. That redemption is possible even after tragedy. As darkness fell over the training complex, Voss prepared her gear with meticulous care. Every piece of equipment checked and rechecked. Every contingency planned for. Every doubt acknowledged and set aside in favor of preparation. Tomorrow she would face the thing she feared most. A precision shot with civilian lives in the balance. A mission that could validate her return to operational status or confirm her worst fears about her own capability. But tonight, surrounded by a team that valued her as a person, not just a tool, supported by systems designed to help rather than exploit, she felt something she had not felt in 2 years. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could be both broken and whole, both haunted and functional, both carrying the weight of past tragedy and still capable of future excellence. The Syrian night was cooler than expected, the air carrying the scent of dust and distant cooking fires. Voss lay prone on a rooftop 1,000 meters from the target compound, her rifle positioned perfectly, her breathing controlled and steady. Beside her, Matsuda served as spotter, his optics trained on the second-story window where their target would appear. The rest of the team was positioned around the compound perimeter, ready to move if the precision shot failed and a full assault became necessary. But everyone knew that a full assault meant exponentially higher risk. More gunfire, more chaos, more chances for civilians to be caught in the crossfire. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on Voss, but she did not let it control her. She had learned over the past 3 weeks that acknowledging fear was different from surrendering to it, that carrying trauma was different from being paralyzed by it. Target window opens in 3 minutes. Thorne's voice came through her earpiece. Confirm ready status. Primary shooter ready, Voss replied. Wind is 2 miles per hour from the east. Range confirmed at 987 meters. Conditions optimal. Secondary shooter ready. Chun added from his position on an adjacent rooftop. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Voss used the time to regulate her breathing, to find that perfect mental state where the world narrowed to just the target and the shot. Not thinking about Afghanistan. Not thinking about the child. Just present in this moment with this mission. Movement in the window, Matsuda said quietly, confirming 2 individuals. Adult male matching target profile and 1 female. Civilian clothes. They are talking. Voss adjusted her scope, bringing the window into sharp focus. She could see them clearly now. The target, a man in his 40s with a distinctive beard matching the intelligence photos, and a woman, younger, her body language suggesting she was uncomfortable with the conversation. The woman is trying to leave. Matsuda continued his narration. Target is blocking the door. Possible hostage situation or domestic dispute. Unable to confirm her status. Voss felt her heart rate increase slightly. This was the scenario she had feared. A shot complicated by civilian presence. The kind of situation that required perfect judgment and absolute certainty. Stand by. Ashford's voice cut through the radio traffic. We are working to identify the female. Do not take the shot until we have confirmation. The woman finally pushed past the target and exited the room. The door closed behind her. The target stood alone in the window, visible from the chest up. Perfect shot placement available. But Voss hesitated. Target is alone. Matsuda confirmed. Window is clear. Shot available. But something felt wrong. Voss could not articulate it precisely, but her instincts were screaming caution. The same instincts that had kept her alive through 4 combat deployments. The same instincts that had detected the threat in Nevada before anyone else. Primary shooter, you have a clear shot, Thorne said. What is your status? Stand by, Voss replied. Something is off about this setup. She studied the compound through her scope with broader focus. Movement in the courtyard below. Shadows that did not quite match the intelligence photos. Positions that suggested more than 12 hostiles. Commander, I count at least 20 individuals in the compound. Twice what Intel predicted. And I see 3 children in the courtyard directly below the target window. They are playing maybe 15 meters from where the target is standing. Matsuda confirmed her observation. Multiple children visible. Ages approximately 5 to 10. If we initiate with a shot, the sound could trigger panic. Children could run toward danger instead of away from it. Ashford processed this information rapidly. Primary shooter, what is your assessment? Voss took a breath, trusting her training and her judgment and the lessons she had learned at terrible cost. Sir, the shot is technically feasible, but the tactical situation is more complex than Intel suggested. If we take this target now, we risk a chaotic situation with children in the immediate area. Request permission to scrub and reassess with better intelligence. The silence that followed lasted only seconds but felt eternal. Voss knew what this decision meant. A scrub mission, potentially letting a high-value target escape. The kind of call that could end careers or earn respect, depending on how leadership responded. Primary shooter, your assessment is sound, Ashford finally replied. Mission scrubbed. All elements withdraw to Rally Point Alpha. We will develop better intel and try again with proper civilian safeguards. The relief Voss felt was profound. Not because she had avoided taking the shot, but because her judgment had been trusted. Because saying no had been accepted not as failure, but as wisdom. The team withdrew smoothly, exfiltrating from the area without incident. By 0100 hours, they were back at the forward operating base, conducting their after-action review. Thorne stood before the assembled team, his expression serious but approving. Tonight, we had an opportunity to eliminate a high-value target. We chose not to take that opportunity because our primary shooter assessed the risk to civilians as unacceptable. That was a right call. He looked directly at Voss. In the old system, there would have been pressure to take the shot regardless, to prioritize mission success over civilian safety, to push through concerns in the name of completing the objective. But this program is built on a different principle. We trust our operators to make calls that prioritize human life, even when it costs us mission success. Ashford took over. Follow-up intelligence confirmed Voss's assessment. The compound had 23 hostiles, not 12. The children in the courtyard were being held there deliberately, likely as human shields. If we had taken that shot, the resulting chaos would have put those children at extreme risk. By scrubbing, we saved those lives and gave ourselves the opportunity to develop a better approach. Sullivan spoke up. So we try again with better intel and a cleaner setup? Exactly. Intelligence is working with local assets to determine when the target will be isolated from civilians. When we get that window, we will execute. But we do it right, not fast. After the briefing, Voss found herself alone with Dr. Kimura via video call, part of the mandatory post-mission counseling regardless of whether shots were fired. You made a very difficult call tonight, the psychologist said. How are you processing it? Voss considered the question honestly. I was afraid I would freeze. That trauma would prevent me from functioning. But what actually happened was different. I did not freeze. I assessed the situation and made a tactical decision based on what I saw, not on what I feared. That is significant growth. You trusted your judgment even when it meant scrubbing the mission, even when it risked professional consequences. That takes courage. It also felt like honoring what I learned in Afghanistan. That child died because I did not have complete information. Tonight, I had incomplete information and I chose to wait rather than risk repeating that tragedy. Dr. Kimura smiled. That is not just growth, Corporal. That is wisdom. You have transformed your trauma into something that makes you a better operator, not a broken one. Over the following days, new intelligence developed. The target's patterns became clearer. A window of opportunity emerged where he would be confirmed alone, away from civilian presence, in a location that allowed for precision engagement with minimal collateral damage risk. 3 days after the scrub mission, the team executed again. This time the intelligence was solid. This time the shot was clean. Voss took the target at 1,040 meters, a single round that eliminated a man responsible for hundreds of deaths. No civilians in danger. No collateral damage. Mission success achieved the right way. The team's response was not celebration, but quiet satisfaction. This was the work. This was what they trained for. Precision. Judgment. Excellence tempered with humanity. If this story moved you, drop a comment about your favorite moment or what resonated most. Have you ever witnessed someone reveal hidden strength when it mattered most? Or known someone who found redemption through returning to their purpose? Share your thoughts below. 2 months later, Voss stood on a stage at the Naval Special Warfare Command headquarters, receiving a commendation for her actions in Nevada and her subsequent operational performance. Captain Blackwell had flown in for the ceremony, along with Ruth. Even some of the SEALs from that initial dismissive team were present, their respect evident and hard-earned. But the real validation came not from the medal or the ceremony. It came from the way Matsuda introduced her to new operators joining the program. From the way Thorne trusted her judgment without question. From the weekly counseling sessions where she continued processing her trauma while still performing her duties. From the knowledge that she had found a way to be both broken and whole, both haunted and functional, both carrying the past and moving toward the future. She thought about the child in Afghanistan often, would always carry that weight. But she also thought about Sullivan, alive because she made 4 perfect shots. About the children in that Syrian courtyard, safe because she had the wisdom to scrub a mission. About the terrorist leader eliminated because she had found the courage to return to the work despite her fear. Redemption, she had learned, was not about erasing mistakes. It was about ensuring that your mistakes informed your wisdom rather than defined your limitations. About being excellent not despite your trauma, but because you had learned from it. About understanding that the cost of capability was real and ongoing, but that with proper support, it was a cost you could afford to pay. As the ceremony concluded and she rejoined her team, Corporal Linnea Voss realized she had finally found what she had been searching for during those 2 years of hiding. Not peace exactly, but something better. Purpose. Community. The knowledge that excellence and humanity could coexist if you built the right systems and surrounded yourself with the right people. She had been just cleaning ranges, trying to disappear, hoping to outrun her past. Until an attack forced her to become visible again. Until 4 shots proved she was more than she pretended. Until a team showed her that being broken did not mean being useless. And now, standing with operators who understood the weight of the work, supported by systems designed to help rather than exploit, she was finally exactly who she needed to be. Not the operator she was before Afghanistan. Not the woman who hid in maintenance roles. But someone new. Someone who carried her scars proudly because they had taught her wisdom. Someone who understood that true strength was not about being invulnerable, but about being broken and still showing up to do the work. The ranges would always be part of her. The brass would always need collecting. But now she collected it as an operator who understood both the cost and the value of every round fired. And that understanding made all the difference.